Hi, I'm Mackenzie, and I'm going to talk about Chapter 13, Critical Thinking Questions for Race, Ethic, and Diversity. The first question is, considering the past as well as the present, are the moves made to restrict or exclude Chinese and Japanese Americans based on economic and racist motives? And I think that it might be both. I think that when the four groups of Japanese people were coming, well, they came over and were Japanese, and then the next generation was called a different name, like Nisai or something, and then that was the second generation, and then the third generation was when the immigrants were the grandparents, and then the fourth generation was when they're pretty much full Japanese Americans. But um, I think that it had to do with economic factors because they were coming over and taking poor jobs, but I don't know if America appreciated that or didn't. But I also know that you need to have at least a middle class or a poor middle class to have a higher class, so they might be using that to their advantage. I mean, history shows that as a fact, but I mean, a fact in this society. I can't speak for all. And it could be racist because they could be giving those jobs and only letting them have those. They're obviously letting them only have those kind of jobs because they want the white people to be supreme. Second question is, what events can you imagine that could cause the United States to again identify the ethnic group for confinement in some type of internment camps? I think what this means is basically like the president has the right at any time to take a group of people and confine them into an internment camp. And I think that one that comes to my mind, at least, is if like a Japanese American would choose to fight on the Japanese side in a war, then I think that like the president would be able to confine those people because they'd be going against American, even though they're technically American citizens. And the third question is, what stereotypical images of Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans can you identify in the contemporary media? And I think that there's stereotypical images and there's not. For example, like an image or video or whatever might be that all Chinese Americans or Japanese Americans are smarter, they're more intelligent, they have better schooling, and um, they are also showed a lot in like martial arts. But I also don't think that people can distinguish between which martial art it belongs to which ethnicity because they're not the same. And Chinese people are often really like offended if you say that they look Japanese or they can't tell if they're Japanese or Chinese, which is hard for like me, especially because I can't tell as much, but like my Chinese friend can totally tell who's Japanese and who's not, or who's Vietnamese and who's not. And I think that, well, it's mostly true that like if you talk to somebody that was Japanese and you said, "Oh wow, like you totally can speak English really well. I can't even tell that you are Japanese." Like, well, you can tell that they're Japanese by what they look like, but they don't speak like they're Japanese, which is really like controversial because that's like sort of a form of white assimilation. Like, that's not good at all. And I mean, other people say like apparently marriage shows the effects of assimilation, and like intermarriage also does. Well, that's pretty much the same thing because as Asians and white people, or like any sort, like that's just an example, like if an Asian person was to marry a white person, then they would just become like they wouldn't look more Asian, they would look more white and mixed. So as like the generations go on, they're like, oh, you don't look completely Asian. That's kind of okay, like that's assimilation. And I think that's really disgusting because I think it's really beautiful to be able to show the beauty in each ethnicity and what each brings to the diverse world because that's what it's meant to be.